Welcome back to part two of our episode with Chiara Munzi, co-founder of ChiChi. In this segment, Aaron and I break down the key takeaways from Chiara's journey, from founding a unique brand in college to pioneering a new category in the health food industry. We'll discuss how her passion and innovative approach to using chickpeas have inspired our own product development at worldie, as well as the challenges and opportunities of building something truly differentiated. For more highlights, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel and visit worldiebrand.com to stay connected. All right, let's dive in.
All right, you want me to start?
Yep, let's go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that Kiara was talking about is the fact that she started her company at a university, and a lot of people in this entrepreneurial class that she was in, and even on her own team, they said they were really interested in entrepreneurship in college. And then once the rubber met the road and they had to graduate and either do entrepreneurship or get a real job, they got a real job. So why do you think that is, that people in that university setting, because we've seen that too, they say they're really interested in entrepreneurship, and then as soon as they graduate, they take a different job or like a day job and then stop doing the entrepreneurial thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like a university specific like trait. Like I think that's a trait that like it's pretty much like something that happens with anyone in any like career field or any path or any like part of life. And the reason is like when you actually have to like do the hard stuff, like when it actually like, it becomes real, then people like make that quote unquote business decision to determine whether or not they really want to be a part of something like that. Like, do they really want to be all in now that the rubber has, quote unquote met the road? So I don't necessarily think it's like something that's like, you know, specific to universities. Now, it might have like a greater pool of people because, while you're in school, you don't really have to kind of like really worry about much besides school. And so then once you're outside of that environment and thrust into the real world, then you've got to make some like, big boy, big girl decisions. So yeah, that could be a contributor to why people decide like, oh yeah, I don't know if I want to take that great of a risk and like not get a salary for the next 2 to 3 years when I have student loans staring at me and all these other things. Like, yeah, I understand startups. There's a chance that like you can be extremely successful, but nine out of 10, startups are going to fail. More than that, but like, to make it easy, 9 out of 10 startups are gonna fail. So, that's not, something that I want to like hang my hat on. I'll rather go ahead and take this like secure job and go corporate and work a 9 to 5 and get all the benefits that come along with that, as opposed to take that chance. And people in the real world are doing that maybe to a lesser extent because they're already in their career fields or their career paths. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of like deciding on the amount of risk you're able to tolerate, and then your own circumstances, like the debt that you have or owe, um, yeah, the status, uh, keeping a certain like lifestyle or whatever it might be, and realizing that you might not get paid for a very long time. Uh, it can lose its luster really quick.
I think that's right. And I think it's really all about risk and sacrifice.
Yeah.
So for us, we still have day jobs, but we're doing the startup on the side. And for us, we're sacrificing a lot of our free time. Because for me, I feel like I have absolutely no free time. Any free
Every
time that
time.
I have, I devote it to the business. And like when you have a 9 to 5 job, and a lot of 9 to 5s, from if you go to certain schools, you're not going to really work a 9 to 5. It's more like 9 to 7, 9 to 8, 9 to 9. And then at that point, you just don't have a ton of time, and adding the stress and the amount of work that a startup requires on top of that, it's really hard. And then also, it's like if you decide not to do the day job, and you just go full time on the startup, that's just a lot of risk. And like you were saying, maybe you have student loans, just the opportunity cost of being in school for that long, you just don't have a lot of money. So I think it's just really hard. And that's probably the reason why you see that a lot at universities. And then also just at a university, starting a company or saying you're starting a company, it's just kind of the sexy thing to do. And
Yeah.
there's almost no risk to doing it. So I think maybe that's why you see that a lot. But why do you think we're different? Like, why do you think we decided to continue to work on this business versus just saying, it was fun while we were in school, but you're going to become a lawyer, I'm going to be a consultant. Let's just go off and do that, and then maybe in the future we'll do something entrepreneurial again.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, maybe it's not like the individual is different as the circumstances and the experiences and like the vision of that individual maybe like have, and the vision would probably be individual specific. So like maybe that is individualistic, but like I think all that stuff that we kind of mentioned as like the drawbacks, we were able to see beyond that because like we were either able to like understand that okay, we are going, you kind of map out a plan for yourself or a plan for like the company and like how you're going to be able to get the job done, and you see like where it can go, and you're like, all right, I'm able to do this, like I'm able to take on that risk. Now for an individual who might like have a whole bunch of like student loans, expectations or stuff going along with like getting out of getting out of the college lifestyle. Like I think it may be different for them, but I think for us, we saw like a vision for the organization. We saw a vision for like where it was going to go, and we still see the same vision. And we were able to tolerate a lot more of the risk that was associated with this type of like venture. And I think for us, that was the reason why we were able, or those were the reasons why we were able to make this leap, whereas others didn't see that same vision or they weren't able to tolerate the risk. And that's those are the things that like distinguish, I believe. What's your take?
So I think for us, we were far enough along in the process where we saw the potential, we saw basically the vision, and we saw it starting to come to fruition. Because I think throughout law school and law school, business school, we were kind of thinking, oh, we're just about a year away or 6 months away. So we
Yeah.
are always kind of like, that launch date is coming up really quick. But at the same time, we weren't necessarily far enough along to know just how much work it was going to be to get this
Mhm.
thing over the line. So I think that combination kind of combined to make us continue on. Whereas like if I had known exactly how much work it's going to be and how hard it was going to be to like juggle a full-time job with this business, maybe back in law school in the third year, I would say like, you know what, I don't know if I want to do this full time. Maybe I'll be like an advisor or, an employee, but I don't know if I want to be a founder. So I think that I think those two things combined to allow us to continue to work on this thing after we graduated.
Yeah. I mean, ignorance is bliss, man. Like not knowing was definitely helpful in like keeping us motivated. Not
Yeah.
because knowing what it took would have probably been a major, another detractor that would have been another hurdle to kind of get over. So
Yeah, and
that
that's
was
exactly
good.
what I said to Kiara in the conversation. I was like, ignorance is bliss because if I had known how hard this was going to be, I don't know if I ever would have started. I'm happy I did it, and I definitely want to keep going. But the past 3 years there's been a lot of pain along the way,
Yeah.
and I don't know if I would subject myself to that again.
Yeah. I mean, I bet that's like the same sentiments like a lot of founders have. Like even like these huge successes, like you talk about like Meta or Tesla or whatever, like prior to them reaching success with their initial venture and thinking about all the work that they would have had to do to get to that particular point, and so that like you don't get like a vision of the success, it would probably be tough for them to say that, yeah, I would be willing to like subject myself to those like grueling hours, the missed opportunities to like spend time with friends or family, like to be able to like say that, yeah, I'm willing to sacrifice that, not knowing that you're going to be successful on the tail end. Like I would feel like there's a very small amount of people who are willing to subject themselves to that, not knowing that they're going to be successful. With like the odds being like overwhelmingly against you, like crazily against you, like 98% against you. There's very few people who want to like step into that. That's not like a good odds unless you like know something. And that's where like I feel like that's why founders, like really good founders, like our successes, you kind of like not to say that you're smarter than anybody, but you just know something that someone else like that the majority of people just don't know or just don't get right now. And if you really like believe in that hunch and go after it, then that's what would be that whole like piece that gets you over those major hurdles. Um, this is changing it up a little bit, but Chiara was mentioning like what was like her reason for being viral or successful on social, specifically TikTok, and she was attributing it to her ability to like tell the story of her company, the story of the two founders. Um, what is the 2 minute worldie story?
I find it
Not the
hard.
founder story, the worldie story.
The worldie story. I
Yeah.
think as you were asking the question, I was kind of thinking like it's people always say that our story is what differentiates us, but like I in my head I can't really figure out exactly what it is about our story that resonates with people. But I would say that the story is basically in the footwear industry. There are a lot of companies that make kid shoes, but there's not a lot of companies that specifically make shoes for kids or make shoes that are good for kids. And um, especially in like the athletic space, there's just a lot of shoes that are too narrow, like they squeeze kids' feet together. They're really designed for men's feet and then shrunken down and kind of marketed as kids' shoes, even if they're not kids'
Mhm.
shoes. So we noticed that gap. We noticed that a lot of kids or a lot of shoes are not designed specifically for kids. We noticed that a lot of these brands that sell kids shoes, they're not thinking about basically like a parent's needs and what is best for them. So we saw that gap. We decided to fill it and be a kids only footwear brand and allow kids to play more sports with one pair of shoes, have more fun, and allow parents to just feel a little bit more confident that they're putting their kids in shoes that set them up for success. So I don't think that that was necessarily a great summary of our story, but what do you think? What would you say?
No, I think that captures a lot of the like the content that we would want to like share with in regards to the company story. One of the things that I would probably add to it is like kind of driving home like or making it a bit more evident how we discovered the problem. Like how did we come across like this particular problem? And I think like we were driven to the footwear industry because we were really like into sports and we wanted to kind of like, do something adjacent to sports in an entrepreneurial sense. And so we got into footwear. And getting into footwear, we start unraveling things because we start talking to customers, we start talking to consumers, we start talking to our target audience and realizing that they weren't necessarily the people that we wanted to build a product for because as we were talking to customers, we found a bigger issue. Like we found that whole issue that you just kind of like highlighted and were able to like, succinctly like talk about in terms of like an industry that was building shoes only for dudes, like only for like adult dudes. So like we wanted to like build something for kids. We wanted to do something that was going to be specific to them. And then we also wanted to like decrease the amount of shoes that are out there because like, oh, we're, sport specific cleats for this sport, for, that sport, that activity, this activity. Like kids are just wanting to like go out and play. They want to go out and experience these sports. Like we wanted to create something that allows them to do that very seamlessly and, not have to like weigh down a parent's pocketbook in order like people don't use pocketbooks anymore so like weigh down a parent's wallet because it's just not like conducive to like allow kids to play all these different sports if you're having to go and equip them for everything. So I think adding that little detail, maybe adding a little to like the effort that we're putting into like the production of it. Like
Yeah.
because we didn't know anything, we had to go out and like, you know, go through the school of hard knocks and learn all this stuff. And we went back and forth with so many different like product developers and like figuring out like the exact design that we wanted that really captured like the whole multi-purpose effect that we wanted, but also was aesthetically like pleasing so that kids would see it as like drippy or whatnot. So like I think those kind of things like we want to incorporate into like our 2 minute worldly story. But I'm like you, if I'm put on the spot, I'm like, golly, where do I even start? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so much that I want to pack into it, like a 2 minute like, spiel on the elevator of like, oh, what's worldly? And like I got like asked that so many times at so many events that like we were recently setting up. And so like figuring out like what's a good like quick spiel because people don't want to sit there and talk to you for 15 minutes. If you had 15 minutes for everybody, then yeah, you can give them all the dirty details. But like being able to like emphasize like, oh wow, we stumbled upon this. It was a big issue. And then once we started unraveling, we found all these other things that we can like change and tweak. And then boom, we came up with this. But even with coming up with that, it's taken a lot to get it here. It's taken a lot of like pulling and begging and demanding, and like finally it's going to show up on our doorstep in December. So like I think that is like something that I want to like kind of work on. So that
Yeah.
does put you on the spot. Wasn't expecting anything like super crazy, but yeah.
Just to add to that, the other thing that we've heard is being former athletes, like, pretty good athletes, not professionals or anything like that. But, we played a lot of sports as
Hmm.
kids. We took our respective sports pretty far. So,
Yep.
like, we kind of know about this industry from an athlete's standpoint. And then also, just you being a dad, you have a very personal connection to that problem that you talked about.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it kind of like makes me think like what story is the story that we should lead with? Because on the one hand, like we were able to tell that story, that worldly story, and then on the other hand, we could tell like a much more personal story, the founder story. What story resonates? Like, what story do you believe we should emphasize?
I I think the personals, I think it's similar to a conversation we've had before, where it's like you start founder focused to get on people's radar to stand out versus other companies, especially when you're still not sure if your product is really outstanding. And then as you iterate and you make the product better, then it becomes more of a product focused story. So I think right now for us, our personal story is going to resonate more with people. And then once we start selling, once we have a little bit of a foothold in the market, then that product or like company focused story will resonate a little bit more. But that, I mean, that's just my personal opinion. I don't have any data to back it up other than anecdotes.
No, I've kind of gone back and forth. Like I was a big proponent of like the founder story. Like, oh, no one really, the worldly story is very like sure. Like, and then when you start like thinking about like all the details, you're like, oh yeah, that does like that might like go over well with like a community. That might go over well with like, our target audience. And so like maybe I shouldn't have been so dismissive of like the worldly story. Like maybe that does like have like it's like it's deserving of like its upstage appearance. So like I don't know, but I think it's something that we could potentially test via marketing, obviously. Like we
Yep,
can
for
like
sure.
figure out what story is like resonating. My hunch is the founder story is still the most important story right now for us because that's going to personalize it a lot more. And people don't really like know that much about the product. But I think the worldly story isn't like something that's going to be on the back burner. Like I feel like it's going to be something that's going to actually be at the forefront as well.
Yeah,
But yeah, I yeah.
I think you have to have a combination.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of like what percent of that story is about us versus what percent of that story is about the company, and just kind of like figuring out the proportion. Because I think even with the worldly story, like with the Nike story, for example, even though it's like a huge product focused company,
Yeah.
when people hear about the inception of it, that's really resonates with them, even though like the product is really what stands out. So I think even like a huge corporation, that founding story is still part of it. It's maybe like 10% founding story, 90% company story. But I think even when you get huge, the founder behind it still matters. So I think for us, maybe we're starting like 50-50 or something like that. And then as we progress, it becomes less and less about us. But I think you do have to have components of both of those stories in order to make it really resonate.
I agree with that. That sounds right. Um, Again, switching it up a little bit and kind of like, well, maybe not switching it up too much, but like thinking about where we're at right now, what are you most skeptical about? Like in regarding worldly, like what are you most like, I just don't know if this is going to work, or I just don't know if this is the right approach, or yeah, what are you skeptical about?
I think the hardest, it's something that people told us when we first got into the footwear industry. They're just like,
Hmm.
it's really hard. You guys don't have any experience. Like it's just not, it's not a great space to get into because it's so competitive. The customer acquisition cost is so high, all those sorts of things. So I think just slowly over time, I'm starting to realize why people told us that. I don't think it's impossible. And I think people discouraged us too much, but I'm starting to understand why they said that. And I'm just a little bit nervous about like basically we have to get like everything right. We're like 95% of things right in order for this company to really take off, which I think is possible, but it's like a 5% possibility. So someone before had told us like I've never seen the movie, but he was kind of like, you got to be like Doctor Strange, and there's like a million different scenarios, and he picks the one where everything works out fine. So I think that's what I'm a little bit nervous about is just the amount of different things that we have to get right, stacking all those correct decisions on top of each other. And if we make one little mistake here or there, then maybe that has a huge kind of cascading effect.
No, that's a good one. I was a bit more like specific with like my idea in terms of like what am I just kind of unsure about. And part of it is because we haven't had an opportunity to test the product yet because we don't have like a wearable sample. But I'm like, are we going to be able to like really work on all these surfaces? Like, is it going to work on courts? Like, I really feel like it's going to work on grass. I really feel like it's going to work on turf, um, dirt, like that. That I feel like it's going to be fine. But like courts is like, oh man, I just really want to test this out because I just don't know. And that I wouldn't say that I'm like not confident in it. I think I'm pretty confident. I think I just have like I would call it like a healthy skepticism towards like the shoe being something that like works on all these surfaces first iteration. Like it's great if it does. Like if it does, that's going to be amazing. But I have a feeling that there's going to be some tweaking that goes on, and that's my like specific like skepticism, and it's like regarding the effectiveness of the lug pattern right away.
Yeah, that's a good one. And we have enough value props that we're considering different kind of like benefits of the product that we're considering at this point that even if we can't do a
Hmm.
multi-surface shoe, and I for a long time that was like our main differentiator, but I think we've added enough things to the product now where we don't necessarily need that differentiator. It would be great if we could, but it might be a thing where it's like it's just a really tough problem to solve to get one shoe to work across all those different surfaces. So maybe it's like two shoes or something like that. Like that's maybe something that we have to consider. But I agree with you that that is a major concern for me because we haven't tested it, so we just don't know.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think like you said, we have a bunch of value props at this point to the point where we can actually like pivot relatively easily and from a marketing perspective and like highlight some other area of the shoe that like we can push to the forefront. I still think it will be a multi-surface. I just don't know whether or not it will work on courts. And that's just simply because I've not had an experience in being able to test the shoe. And we'll be able to do that soon. So, what are you, and maybe on the inverse of this, like what are you most confident about? Like what do you feel like, oh yeah, we're gonna knock this out of the park, or we're already like knocking it out of the park?
I really think differentiation, um, like it's so important. And initially, I was just kind of like I don't know, and maybe this was other people having said this to me, the reason why I thought this, but I was kind of like, I don't know how we're gonna create a product that is very different from what's already on the market.
Hmm.
But I'm now confident that we'll be able to do that and we'll be able to communicate that effectively. So I mean, I'm confident that our product will be different. And especially if we hit on that multi-surface, like all the different surfaces that you mentioned, if we're able to do that, then I feel like so confident about our product and our marketing around it that we'll be able to get that right. So I would say I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I'm very confident on that, but I won't use that one. I'll use our target consumer. I think we've identified the right audience. Like that's what I'm confident. And that means I believe in product market fit when we launch. Like we're gonna have product market fit. And I think it's based upon like what you're confident in, differentiation. And that's a big thing. Like I think that's a huge thing. I think my confidence in differentiation like leads me to be confident in product market fit. And also I'm confident in product market fit because I'm confident that we've identified the right target audience.
Makes sense. So this is switching gears again. Do you feel like, because Chiara is young, she started her company in college, and I think she's still probably like 22 or 23.
Hmm.
So do you think you're the right age and kind of in the right stage of life to be an entrepreneur, or do you ever wish that you had started a little bit earlier in life?
I mean, I think you can an entrepreneur can be of any age. Like it doesn't really like matter like how old or young you are. Um, maybe there are some ages that are relatively too young, but like I think like it doesn't that part doesn't matter. I think the second piece of it, like where you're at in life, like what you're doing, that piece like is a bit more important. If you don't have the time or you don't feel like you can make the time because you have so many other commitments, then it's very difficult for you to take that leap into entrepreneurship. So I think that's like the most important part of it is like figuring out the right time. And for me, it's like kind of forcing that. Like you realize that there's never going to be a good moment. And I almost think of it like I talked to like Kate about like when we were discussing like having kids and like wanting to wait and like figuring out like we let's do this, let's wait till we get like this house purchase, let's wait till we like move, and then realizing like dang, there's never going to be like a convenient or good time. So you really just have to like impose your will and say like this is what we're going to do. Like there's not going to be a great time for it. We're just going to do it because this is what we like believe in, this is what we want to do. And the same thing with like entrepreneurship. Like yeah, you might come across like a great time in your life where you can do it. Chances are like that, for most people, that's not going to come about. Like you're just going to have to go out there and impose your will and just do it. If that's what you believe in, go out and do it. And so for me, like, yeah, that's how I had to approach it. Like, hey, like I have a lot going on, a family that's growing, moving cities, different job, a demanding job, a lot of things that say like, yeah, you just don't have like the bandwidth for this, but like you got to impose your will and say like, no, this is like what I believe in. This is what I want to do. And you just make it make it happen. And so going back to like your question of like what makes, us different, I think like it's just that mindset, like imposing your will and saying like, no, this is what I'm going to do. Like I'm going to take all those risks and I'm going to do something that's not very convenient because this is what I believe in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good mindset to have. And for me, I don't feel like I'm too old or it's the wrong stage of my life or anything like that. But I do wish that I had done something more entrepreneurial earlier, only because
Yeah.
then I would have those learnings, those lessons to leverage now. But I think it's one of those things where it's like whenever you're doing something for the first time, you wish you had started earlier so that you weren't a beginner. And there's just no way to avoid having to start at some point. So I think this is a good time for me to be an entrepreneur and kind of like you were saying this time around because I've tried entrepreneurship in the past and with the risk and with the amount of time I just didn't really go after it the way that I needed to. But this time around, I'm just kind of like, I'm just gonna make it work. I don't necessarily know how. Some days I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can do this or how I can make all this work, but um, I just want to make this work, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make this work because entrepreneurship is never easy. And if you decide not to do it when it gets hard, then you're never going to do it.
Yeah. I always have those like moments. I walk most days I walk to and from work and it's like a 2 mile walk. So it ends up being like, somewhere around 30, 40 minutes. And I remember several times like thinking, dude, this is gonna be my last startup. Like I don't know if I can do this. Like like this is like a lot. I don't know if I can keep doing this. So this is it. And then there's some days I'm like super, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be a serial entrepreneur. I can't wait to like the next thing. Like I can't wait to like see this thing grow. Like, and it's just like it ebbs and flows. And so I think it's just a mindset thing. And then going back to I didn't answer the other part of your question in terms of like, did I wish that I was an entrepreneur earlier on in life, or if I had started early? Yeah. Yeah. I anybody like if the earlier you start, like the more practice you get at it, the better you'll be. And so like, yeah, I definitely wish that I had like embraced it earlier. And so that's why I had this opportunity. And I joke with Kate all the time to brainwash my own kids and like get them down that entrepreneurial track relatively early and get them to see like the benefits of going out and like striving and like working on a venture. And so that's something that I think is super important to me and a value that I really want to make sure gets passed along, to my girl. So yeah, I do wish that I had started early, but I'm able to use that wish and pass it along to my daughters and get them kind of in the game much sooner than I was.
Yep. And it's kind of like that discipline versus motivation dynamic that people talk about. So like there's some days where you have a ton of motivation. Like you're saying, you wake up and you're like, I can't wait to work on this. I have so many ideas. I can't wait to until I can go full time on this thing. And then there's other days where you're like, I have a lot of other stuff going on. Like I don't really want to do this, but I have to. And that's where discipline kicks in. And I feel like for me, when I was playing sports, there would be days where I'm like, I don't want to go to practice. Like I have a ton of
Yeah.
homework. I have all this other stuff. I'm tired. I didn't sleep much last night. I don't want to go to practice, but you go because you have to. And then when you're there, you put in the work. And then game days, like I never felt like, oh, I don't want to go to a game. Like
Yeah.
you enjoy playing. So I think it's that same kind of mindset, just like putting in the time even when you don't feel like it, because you know that you need to. Because then when those days when you are really excited to work on it, you want to feel like there's not just a mountain of work or a ton of things that are really overdue that you haven't done.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I definitely agree about like putting in the reps and that analogy, that metaphor of like using practice um, as a way to kind of get better, get yourself prepared for the game, and like not really wanting to do the practice and having to get into that right mindset. I think back to like those days, those two a days in the summer for football practice. Like nobody really liked two a days. Nobody really like slapping on the pads in like 100-degree weather and going out and going through tackling drills. Like that's not necessarily fun. You got to like trick yourself into thinking like this is fun, but like it really isn't. But like game day, like it made it all the more worth it when you go out there and you kind of are able to like perform at a very high level simply because you're able to put all that practice in. So it's certainly a mindset thing. So you always have to have that vision of like this is where this work that I'm putting in today, this like grueling work that I'm putting in today is going to pay off dividends for worldie in the future.
Yeah, 100%. And then one of the other things that Kiara mentioned was she sometimes dies a little bit on the inside when someone says they don't like her idea or they say her chickpea oatmeal tastes bad. Have you ever had that kind of feeling when someone says our idea doesn't make sense or it's stupid? And also, do you feel like you've developed a thicker skin having been an entrepreneur for a little while now?
I think I developed a thicker skin through the military, especially through like flight school, because you just get chewed out for every little bitty thing that you screw up because you can't really make those type of mistakes in the jet because everything gets magnified and anything that you do wrong can like materialize into something catastrophic. And so not to sound so doom and gloom, but yeah, I do think like it takes a thick skin to be an entrepreneur. Like you've got to like really love your idea and really be behind your idea, believe in it, while at the same time being able to take criticism and to take it constructively and like being able to like assess whether it's something that you can use in order to like make improvements or something that you just use as fuel to help you like continue to grow as not only like a company or an entrepreneur, but also just as an individual. So yeah, I think I have come across that. I like a little anecdote. Like I remember at this it's like a trade show event set up like the worldie shoes or whatever, set up like the worldie booth. And this little girl comes up to me and she says, Nikes are better. And I'm like, yeah, they are. They are better because they've been around for this long, but like they're better for now. Like right now they're better. But soon we're gonna build something much better than those shoes. And so it's able to like redirect in a way, like negativity in order to create some sort of like way to help you kind of grow as either a company, like so taking it as feedback and like gathering it and noticing any kind of trends that you might want to like act upon, or just using it as like fuel from an individual perspective. Like, okay, this is going to be something that I use as like a growth fuel. Like it's almost like that competitive nature that comes out of you like an athlete when they tell you you can't do something like, oh, you're never going to be able to guard him or you're not going to be able to score this or whatever. And you're like, oh, I'm about to, I'm about to go out and show you actually. And so like, I think that type of like competitive fuel, like just like works in my favor, like that background of like when people say something negative, it's not necessarily like, slumping your shoulders and saying, woe is me, like I'm not gonna be able to like get this done. It's like, no, now I'm about to prove you wrong. It's like that Mamba mentality or the Jordan like meme, like, yeah, you said that and I took it personally.
Yeah, I would say I agree with all that. I think for me, because I'm used to getting a lot of feedback from sports, from jobs I've had. So like, I'm not exactly, I don't get really upset or down if someone gives me negative feedback. I more kind of listen to it, figure out what parts of it make sense, what parts don't make sense, and then just kind of like improve based on that. But I would say in the past, sometimes I would put too much weight on what one person would tell us. So if the person had experience in a certain industry or certain in some kind of area that we're doing something in, and they said, what you guys are doing makes no sense or it's dumb or it's never going to work, then sometimes I would be like, oh, that person is right. Now we need to go back to the drawing board. But now I'm more kind of like, it's just one person saying that. Like, let me add that to everything else that we've heard, that we've seen, that we've experienced, just to kind of continue to add one more, voice to a ton of voices that we've already heard from. So I think that's something that I've been a little bit better about since I've been an entrepreneur, just kind of like putting things in context. And if someone were to just say, like, you guys are idiots, this is the worst idea ever, I don't necessarily, I mean, I'll try to listen and figure out why they're saying that and figure out if there's any merit to it. And if there is, then adjusting based on that, but not being like, oh, this person is a footwear expert or marketing expert. So therefore, what they're saying must be true.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the transportation industry, like had someone who was a stalwart in the transportation industry 20 years ago got pitched the Uber idea, they would have thought that was like completely asinine. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's absolutely crazy. So, like, I think until you build it, until you prove them wrong or like prove to them that like it can be done, like people are gonna see it as like weird or like crazy or far-fetched. And I think that is like a protective moat around your idea. Like
Yeah.
the fact that like people think it's not a good one, like that's a protective moat around your idea. Like that's why people weren't like jumping or racing to steal Uber's idea of like, oh, have a stranger come pick me up and drop me off at my home, like, and then like, yeah, and ride in their car, like that. Yeah, that sounds terrible. But like now, when we actually practically apply it, like, yeah, oh yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And now it's a multi-billion-dollar company. So like, I think those types of negative comments kind of like insulate like the brand, and that's perfectly fine if they want to build these tall walls around like the idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
All right, I only had really one last question, and this is like regarding whether or not like our brand is at this point premium, and what does that even mean?
I think
If so, what does that even mean?
I think it is going to have to be premium based on our costs, based on all the different kind of like value propositions or benefits that we're baking into the product. I think we're going to have to charge a price that is a premium. And I think in terms of what it means to be a premium brand, it's you're paying for extra quality. That's in like a very succinct way. That's what I would say it means because you can be expensive and not be premium. So if you
Yeah,
just sell the same product but sell it for 2x, that's an expensive brand, but that's not premium. I think premium is the price is going to be higher than average, but the value is also going to be higher than average. And you just hope that you're giving, even though someone is paying more, you're still giving them a ton of value. So they feel like it's worth it to pay more because they're going to get more value than that incremental price from more of like an average product in that space.
totally agree with that. And that was pretty much my answer to that question. I believe we are a premium brand simply because of the value that we're packing into one shoe and like the quality that we're trying to pack into one shoe. And I don't want to get people confused with luxury. It's not a luxury. This is premium, I think, follows the line of quality more than like luxury does.
Yeah.
So because luxury you look, it's like, oh, it's not a necessity, it's not needed.
You're
But I feel
paying
like,
for, you're just paying for the brand name with luxury. You're
yeah,
not paying for the added quality, whereas premium, it's the quality that you're paying for, not necessarily the name.
yeah, exactly. And so like trying to get people into that like frame as opposed to thinking of it as like, oh, they're just creating a luxury item. This isn't about creating a luxury item. We are, in essence, when we started identifying all these problems and we tried to like pack all this value and quality into the shoe, it becomes premium. And we just couldn't help it. Like it becomes a premium product, but it's not a luxury product. It's not something that we're just like hiking up margins for the sake of it and putting on like fancy branding and bedazzling it and like trying to say like, oh, it's a new fashion statement or whatever. That's not what we're kind of going for with the brand.
Yeah. Similar to that. So Chiara mentioned that when she launched, her product was too expensive. Do
Hmm.
you think that we're at risk of launching with a product that is going to be perceived as too expensive?
Absolutely not. I think we were concerned about it earlier on. I was also talking to a just a retail outlet out here in Denver and kind of getting an idea of the price points. And I think price is a measure of differentiation. Like how much you can charge for something is based upon the differentiation component. And we've already mentioned earlier how confident we are in our differentiation. And then also the right price, I believe, will exclude a good amount of people, like probably like 90-95% of people. But then you think about that 5-10% of people who are going to think like, wow, they are selling this impossibly low. Like this is such a great value because they get it. They understand what we're trying to do with the shoe. And they're like, wow, they just wrapped up 4 shoes into one shoe. So instead of going out and paying like $20-$30 for 3-4 pair of shoes, I get to pay like maybe like 70-80 bucks for one shoe that does all that. Like you see a value, and then I don't have to worry about like changing or finding or any of that other stuff. Like you see a value in that. And those kind of people will recognize that right away. And those are the kind of people, those are the customers that we're looking for because those are the ones who get it are the ones who are going to be providing that constructive feedback. They're going to be the ones who can tolerate like, oh yeah, love the idea, love the shoe. These are the type of changes that I would add. Or this is like what happened when, little Johnny or little Susie was wearing it. And they provide that type of feedback that we can turn around and utilize in our next iteration, as opposed to a race to the bottom by like creating like going for a low price and trying to undercut like the industry and figuring out like wait like that's not going to be fruitful, and it's going to create like a bad product. It's going to attract bad customers. It's going to lead to like bad marketing. um it's going to lead to us sticking in our day jobs for much longer. So like I don't think price right now is a concern for us in terms of like being too expensive, simply because it's a reflection of the differentiation that we're putting into the product and the value that we believe the consumer, our target consumer, will be able to get out of the product.
Yeah, I would say that because in the past I might have said like, yes, we are at risk of launching with a product that's too expensive. But I think what it is that certain people, if you have a premium product, kind of similar to what we were saying before, certain people are just going to be like, they're just going to look at the price tag and they're going to say, this is too expensive. Like, why would I pay 70 or 80 bucks when I could pay 30 or 40 or 20 or 30? And that person doesn't really understand the value propositions, or they don't value kind of like the added quality that we're putting into the product. So I think that's just a reality of having a product that's premium. People are going to say that it's too expensive, but those people aren't your target segment. So there's one person that we know in the footwear industry who has like a very premium product. And I follow this person's brand on Instagram. And whenever they post something, there's just a ton of people in the comments saying, this is way too expensive. This is a ripoff. I can't believe you would charge, two, three, 4x what other brands are charging. And this person's brand is doing fine. It's just there's a ton of people on social media who are not the target segment. They just see it come across their feed and they say, for whatever reason, this is too expensive, even though they're not even considering buying it.
Yeah. And if you were to like, and those are like that's what, to my point exactly. Like, those are like the customers that you really actually don't want, because that particular customer like is going to complain about a lot of different things, and it's going to end up being a headache, and you're going to have to spend a lot of manpower like catering to this individual or group of individuals. And so like I think like the idea of using price to kind of weed out those type of customers is actually a good idea, and it might sound counterintuitive, but like the first price that we actually come out with will probably be the highest price that we can charge our customers. Like I think from that point on, from like like assuming a successful launch, like from that point on, you're going to want to like move to the right of the adoption curve. Like you're going to want to like be more inclusive. So like you're going to include and capture more customers who maybe aren't as excited as your first customers were. So like that first price, that initial price is set for your true believers so that they can help, craft the brand into that brand that can move to the right on that adoption curve. Like you want like that's the next part of the company is like that customer. Like the customer is going to help build the that brand, that product, this product out to like where it needs to be in order to like be adopted by a much larger segment. But right now we just need to focus on those early adopters, and like that's why it sounds counterintuitive, but like that first or that initial price will probably be the highest that we can charge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a good segue into my next question. I think Chiara was mentioning that she's just a little bit ahead of the average consumer right now, but
Yeah.
they're going to catch up. So, do you think, based on what you just said, do you think we are ahead of? I mean, we don't have a product yet, but with our product that we think we're going to be able to launch, do you think we're ahead of the consumer and the consumer has to catch up a little bit, or how do you just think? How do you think about that?
I think we are ahead of the consumer, and like any good company should be ahead of the consumer. Like it shouldn't be like a reactive brand. Like those are like the knockoffs, the people who like come in, the second movers, the guys who are like, oh, they found like a new niche and whatever. Now they're just trying to like squeeze in and like take a little bit of like the market cap. So like I think we are ahead of, you know, consumers. We are ahead of like the competition in that like not only from a product perspective, but also from like our business, like our idea of like what we want to do with the business, from a retail, from like even like an operational, so like a production standpoint. Like I think we're ahead of them, and we're going to be introducing these like kind of like newfound approaches to the footwear industry that like that is pretty like cut and dry. It's been doing things the same way for a very long time. This is like kind of innovative. And so like I think we are ahead, and that's just proof that we're doing things right. Like you gotta be ahead in order to like if you really want to like capture a new segment, like capture like a new piece of the industry, you gotta be ahead. Otherwise, you're just like, a copycat.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think basically the logical next step is if you are ahead, you can just wait for the consumer to catch up, but the better
Yeah.
thing to do is probably educate them and bring them along quicker. So for us, for example, it's talking about how we design the shoe, how it's specifically designed for kids, what specific aspects of the shoe make it better for kids, and kind of like what benefit is your kid going to see wearing our shoe versus another shoe, and then similar to what you were saying before, just really explaining to them all the value that we've packed into that shoe. So they don't just see the price tag and think that's too expensive. They see the price tag, they understand everything that's built into the shoe, and then they do the math in their head in terms of like, okay, one shoe for 70 to 80 bucks versus four pairs of shoes for 20 to 25 each. Like it's cheaper for me to just go with one shoe. So I think education is just an important piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah. And this is something that was brought up in the conversation that we had with like our I'll call him our fractional CMO. And he was talking about a way to like have consumers visualize that very thing that you just mentioned. And he was saying like, oh yeah, you what you can do is like you can break it up into like boxes like, oh yeah, in the top row of boxes, you have a soccer cleat, football cleat, basketball shoe, tennis shoe, or whatever. And you can like have prices for each one. Like for, the typical kid price for a shoe, like $20 for this soccer cleat, $25 for this tennis shoe, $30 for this ba basketball shoe or whatever. And then in the blocks underneath each one, you have, the same worldie shoe fitting each category, and you tally up the price and like you get a chance to like quickly see like one, oh, this is a multi-surface shoe. Oh, it's replacing three or four different pairs of shoes that I have in my kid's closet. And so like the price itself, like kind of like, oh, there's a lot of value in this shoe already. And you can like easily see that. And like I was like, oh yeah, that's probably a pretty good idea that we can maybe kind of use on like IG or something. But that's another maybe story or conversation.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I've seen that kind of thing a ton of times. So it makes sense. Do you think it's inevitable? Because Kiara was saying this. Do you think it's inevitable that someone is going to enter the exact same space as us?
Yeah, if we do a good enough job, it's inevitable. Someone's gonna like. There's always going to be a copycat or a second mover or someone who's going to see something that's doing really well and they try to like take a piece of the market. Like that's just the way it is. Like if we're successful as we think we can be with this idea, with this venture, then there's going to be other people who are going to try to follow the exact same path and like create some kind of like alternate. And so, yeah, we're going to always have to have like a way to combat that. And part of it is like by branding. And this is something that Kiara was mentioning. Like they're not going to be able to share the same story. They're not going to be the one who did it the first, so they're not going to be able to say that consumers are going to realize, who was the stalwart here. And so, like, I think that's inevitable. Like, people coming or companies or organizations or whatever ventures coming out and like trying to carve out a segment of like this newish industry. Like, I think that's going to be something that if we're successful is going to inevitably happen.
I think so too. And I think it just makes it all the more important for us to iterate and continue to improve our product. And the way to do that is gathering feedback from customers, talking to them, understanding what their pain points are, what their needs are, how well our product is delivering on the different value props that we have, and just doing everything we can to continually improve. Because I mean, being in the space first and getting all that data, I think that's going to put us ahead. And it will be hard for other companies to catch up if we're doing everything that we need to do and improving the product.
Yep, definitely. We'll have that first mover advantage.
Yeah. So would you say, are there any companies, like specific companies that have had success that you feel like gives you more confidence that our company will be successful?
I mean, specifically in like the footwear industry, probably companies like Hoka, Allbirds. I'm gonna think of someone else. I mean, those two kind of like stand out. Maybe on like they were able to take a piece of the segment from an incumbent. So like you've got the incumbents like Nike, Adidas, Puma, that like seem to have like been entrenched in this industry for forever, and they have loyal followings. They seem to have all the money, all the connections, and like it's you know, ask anybody outside, yeah, it's very hard to like be able to like wage war against these Goliaths. But having seen them like successfully tackle these giants of the industry, like I think that kind of like gives me a bit more confidence that like what we're doing, like how we're doing, being very nimble, being very like aggressive with our approach, uh, that we can too be like very successful and carve out and not only just carve out but like also create a new segment. So I think that's those two kind of stand out to me. There's a number of different ones that I could also use as an example, but those two come to mind.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because a lot of people, probably like 5 to 10 years ago, they would have said, you're never going to be able to compete with a Nike or an Adidas. And then those companies that you mentioned, On, Hoka, Allbirds, they came in and
Yeah.
grabbed a good amount of market share. And now people are telling us like, okay, now that's it. No, there's not room for anyone else. It's going to be Nike. It's going to be Adidas, On, Hoka, Allbirds. So I just think it's funny that people always think that it's too crowded, but there's always these companies that are kind of like popping up and taking market share. And I was talking to my dad about a week ago, and he was like, I was since you've started this company, I've been noticing a lot more of the different brands that people are wearing. And I was at the gym the other day, and it was like nobody was wearing Nike; they were wearing On, Hoka, Noble. So like with
Yeah.
that in mind, maybe there is room for you guys. And I was like, yeah, I agree with that. I feel like it's a good time to get into the footwear industry because there are those bigger brands like you mentioned, and then there's also just a bunch of smaller brands that are way earlier in the process that we've kind of talked to, and they're kind of building their brands in smaller niches, and maybe they'll get as big as an On or a Hoka someday. But I think the huge companies and then the smaller niche companies too that you're seeing in the footwear space that are having success, all that just makes me more confident that there is room for us. And even if it's not like a huge success like a Nike, I think we still can carve out enough of a niche to support ourselves and go full time on this thing.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
And then also, I know Chiara was saying that she wants to be the Quaker Oats of chickpeas. And that's something that you kind of see a lot in like articles, things like that. Like this company is the Netflix of books, or, the Uber of truck driving, or just random kind of comparisons like that. Do you ever think like that? Do you want to be the insert company here of footwear, or no? Does that feel like kind of a weird framework?
No, it's not weird. I think we started off saying like, oh, we want it to be like, you know, we would compare ourselves to like Nike, like in terms of like where we would want to see ourselves grow and become, and like how we want it to be that to like kids, like we want it to be this type of like company, but like for kids' shoes. So I don't think that's like a crazy or wild or weird way to like, visualize where you want to be at in the future. But now I've kind of see it like a lot of like athletes who are getting to that big stage, or like they seem to be like the ones who have next. So you hear them say like in regards to like the comparisons that they get, like, oh, this is like the next Michael Jordan, or this is the next Kobe Bryant, or this is the next LeBron James. And like anytime an athlete like that gets posed with that type of comparison, they're like, whoa, whoa, no, no, no. I want to be like whoever I am. Like I want to be the next me. Like I want to like make my own name and carve my own niche and like, you know, have my own like legacy and not like follow or duplicate or try to compare myself to the legacy of another. I want to be able to kind of stand on my own feet. And I move more towards that standpoint. Like I don't know if I want to be those, or I want to be something different. I want to be worldly. I want worldly to have like I want people to like use us as an example. So I've kind of used that analogy in the past, and I think we both kind of used that analogy in the past in terms of like equating like where we want to be or progress to like a company that's already kind of done it or they're currently at that particular pinnacle. So nothing wrong or weird or you know different about doing that. But I think now, and I mean, I guess I'll just speak for myself. Like now I've gotten to the point where I'm just like really focused on us. And like, I think we can leave our own legacy and like create our own like framework, by which people compare us, to where they want to be at.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the comparison that Kiara made, like to me, that made complete sense. When I was saying that sometimes it's a weird framework, it's when it's like two things that are completely unrelated, and it's obvious that the person is just using that brand, like, oh, we're the Uber of some random thing, and it's like, well, you're just using
Yeah.
Uber because people know that, and it's a big company, but it's not. It doesn't really help me understand what you do. But I think what Kiara said made complete sense. For us, I know we've kind of used a bunch of different things in the past. Like we said, Nerf times Disney
Yeah.
times Nike times a microbrewery times Top Golf, like different kind of like combinations of those things. And sometimes it helps a person kind of like understand what we're doing. But I'm starting to become like you, where I just want to explain what we're doing and let that speak for itself.
Yeah.
Um, and I still do kind of like look to certain brands as inspiration, right? Like in the footwear industry and other industries. And there are certain things that I want to replicate, not copy, but replicate. Um, so that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about it. I'm like, these are a list of companies that I admire and that serve as inspiration, but I want to be the first version of us. I don't want to be the next version of any existing company.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was trying to say. So I definitely agree with that.
And then just last question, and this is maybe more of a general one, but I know Kiara was saying that she had a group of three people in her in this college class where they started off with the idea, and
Yeah.
then two of them decided to do it full time. One of them decided to go off and just kind of start his career. Um, I know that we had a very similar experience where we started off in a class. I think there were four of us
Four of us. Yeah.
on the team. Two of us stayed, two of us decided to go off and do other things. And then also just throughout our journey, we've had a decent amount of people who have come on, we've kind of evaluated, and for whatever reason, they just didn't come on full time. And I was just kind of like thinking about it. I'm like, man, there's like a lot of people who have been on our team for some period of time and then have left. Do you kind of feel that same way when you look back, that there's just kind of a lot of people that we've brought in and they helped us for a period of time and then they left and kind of did something else?
Yeah. No, I think there's been a lot of like quick turn relationships that we've had with people who've been a part of the company in some form of fashion, and for whatever reason, we weren't able to like continue that relationship, or that relationship ended up expiring. So I think that's just like maybe a nature of the beast. Like that's like part of like the process of like creating a startup. Like people get like wildly excited about the idea, but at the same, the same hand, like they end up like 3 or 4 weeks down the road, like becoming less enamored by it. Like, oh wow, when they kind of realize the amount of work and the relatively low chance of success. Like I think that becomes like a bit disheartening for a lot of folks, and they tend to navigate towards things that are a little bit more concrete, a little easier to like quantify as to like the ratio of success to like failure. And so I think um that's just part of the process. So yeah, we have come across a lot of people who've been with us for a season, and then yeah, they've kind of gone. And like not I don't think anything bad about the vast majority of those people. I think like they're really like I still like talk to the majority of them, but like I think it's just like it's not going to be right for everyone. Like it's just not going to be a fit for everyone, and that's like part of it. Like not everyone's going to be, you know, a worldie teammate. Like not everyone's going to be a part of the organization. And it's it's okay, but I do appreciate like whatever effort that they put into like getting us to this point. Like and I want to make sure that like I, acknowledge like, yeah, you did for whatever, period of time help us and, definitely appreciate that. But now, like it's kind of, the ship keeps moving. The show goes on.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. And I mean, I think the vast majority of people that we've worked with, I look back on our time together and I feel like very positive about our time together and what, the perspective that that person was able to provide, the work that they did for us, all those sorts of things. So I think, like you said, it's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes it can be a little bit sad when
Yeah.
someone kind of has that conversation with you where they're like, it was fun, but this is too much work, or I have something else that I have to do. And I remember back in grad school, before we had like incorporated or anything like that, I
Yeah.
think it went from four of us to three of us. It was three of us for a while, and then it went to two of us. And I got so sad when the third, like I was almost gonna cry, because I just felt like I don't know, I was kind of nervous that maybe you would also leave, and then it would just be me. But yeah, I think that's just the nature of the beast. It's fun to have the consistency of just me and you the whole time. And we kind of know that we're going to stick this thing out. And then hopefully we can bring on some other people that are going to be full time at some point. But until then, we just have to have these temporary relationships.
Yeah. I think, not to keep like driving home or kicking that dead horse. Um, I think that's just like part of how it is. Like there's going to be very few people at the beginning who have a strong enough belief in the vision to like continue through like all the trials and tribulations that you have to go through to get the venture off the ground or to even keep that thing afloat. So like I think that's like part of it. But later on, when you experience a little bit of success, you're going to get a lot more people who can kind of see that vision because they're going to be like, oh, wow, yeah, they've gotten to this level. Now I can see what they're doing. Now I can see this thing getting to that, that multi, like big six figure beyond that kind of stage. Like, I think like that is like something that's going to like come into fruition down the road. But like I fully expected like the amount of true believers at the beginning to be relatively low. I didn't think it would just be the two of us like initially because I did think like we had some others, but it's just a part of the process. You kind of like weed them out, and but I think it actually ends up working out for the best because you get the ones the true disciples on board, and you can eventually start bringing people on later on. So
Yep,
cool.
completely agree. So that's all I had in terms of questions, unless you had any last ones.
No save rounds for me. That was good. I don't know how long was that.
I think that was about an hour.
Sweet. That's like right along the time frame that I wanted to keep it at. So that works.